we are once again, David Simpson, the Remedy Project, Criminal Justice Realm, back with another one of these training videos. Oh my gosh, you must be sick of this by now. What training? What kind of training is this? I'm not learning anything. That's what you say. But the truth is that you are learning. You're getting more knowledgeable in the Federal Bureau of Prisons and their system and how things work. From in the initial videos, the mindset of those who are incarcerated and those who are responsible for them, and now you're getting insight into documents, policy, and stuff that is important to those who are incarcerated and or to the system in order for you to help them. Without this information, without this understanding, you would not be able to sufficiently help anyone who is incarcerated. And if you check the amount of folks who are out there trying to help folks who are incarcerated right now and ask them about what you're learning, the administrative remedy process. Have they ever seen these programs, these program statements? Have they ever really took a look at the handbook? Did they ever think it was serious or knowledgeable to look into that stuff? The majority of them would tell you no, and that they have always suffered and found it very hard to assist folks who are incarcerated with prison stuff, and that only when you had the assistance of someone who was incarcerated that did the administrative remedy process and worked with folks to that capacity that they would get things done significantly. And so here I am trying to make the multitude, the masses and students of the Remedy Project be professionals at assisting folks who are incarcerated with the administrative remedy process. And because I told you before, they need it because they just go through so much that getting on top of this stuff and learning it and understanding it and even finding someone to teach them, to train them like you found me, is very hard and very difficult, right? So that's why we're here. All right, so let's dive into this next document that we're going to study here. Again, I'm just going to walk you through this document just to introduce you to it. The idea here is that you would um, read this at least a minimum of twice if you're going to continue to assist folks who are incarcerated, and three times if you're going to be doing quite a few remedies, because you need to know and understand the process. You don't have to memorize this stuff, but you need to be familiarized enough with it that you could navigate this document and go find the information that you need, to check out whatever you're filing, whether it's timely, whether it can be filed, and so on and so forth, right? So I'm just going to give you a run through, introducing you to these documents to get you going. All right, so this first document that I have here is the Administrative Remedy Program. It's a program statement. So in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, all the rules that cover everything pertaining to the prison system are listed in a series of documents called program statements. There's a bunch of them available, and you could find them on the Federal Bureau of Prisons website. They make that stuff available to the public, which is actually a great thing. One of the one of the few good things that they do. Sometimes I want to believe that they be hiding some of them, but they make the majority of them available, right? And so what is important here? So program statement, and the number is 1330.18. Remember, I've always told you that numbers in the Federal Bureau of Prisons or in the criminal justice system is more important than folks' actual names for some reason. This program statement, when you see it listed in federal documents in the administrative remedy process, when it's being used, we say program statement or PS number 1330.18, right? And then we'll go to the section and quote that and so on and so forth. I'll show you that in a little bit. but this one, the actual name, other than the programs, is Administrative Remedy Program. All right. Again, what is the Administrative Remedy Program? The Administrative Remedy Program is is policy that governs the way that folks who are incarcerated supposed to address or bring up issues, any issue that they might have, whether they just want something, whether they feel like they need something, whether they're being neglected and want to raise that as an issue, whether someone did them something and they have a complaint, whether they feel like their time is miscalculated, they're being abused. It doesn't matter what. If they have an issue with the prison system and the prison is responsible for it or can help them resolve it, they are supposed to bring that issue to the prison officials by way of this program, the administrative remedy process, right? Or the administrative remedy program. They're supposed to follow this guide, the guide to bring that information forth. If they do not, they have no official issue on record. So only issues brought through this program would be considered by the administration, the prison administration, and or the government officials and or the courts as a legitimate issue. If it's not documented in the administrative remedy process, it's kind of like not an issue. You might really have an issue and they're helping you address it or whatever, but as soon as they fall off or whatever with that issue, mm, or you decide, hey, you know what, they were helping me. I told them about an issue, they were helping me, and then they stopped, and now I want to go to court, and you go to court, and the court says, oh, well, you didn't file an administrative remedy process. Well, you didn't exhaust your remedies, actually. That's what they'll tell you. And now you're stuck out there. Why? That is because you didn't follow this process, or you didn't make your complaint, or the incarcerated person, I should say, didn't make their complaint official, right? And so they do that by using this process. That's what this process is for. All right. And so let me walk you through that. Okay, so back to this. Again, how do we quote program statements? Very important. We're going to cover this again later on in training when we're actually doing this stuff, but it's good for me to show it one time here. This is program statement, or if you're documenting it in a remedy, PS 1330.18, and then this would be section 542.10, right? And then you quote what it says. It says here purpose, and then you could have this quote in there in because this is what you're relying on to bring an issue. If you were addressing an issue based on the purpose of the administrative remedy program, that's what you'll be doing. So in other sections, you would quote the section and bring that stuff up, right? You can also say the administrative remedy program statements, section 542.10, purpose and scope, or the administrative remedy program statement, purpose and scope section states, right? And then you go into that. That's another way you could do it, but the general way is more to use the numbers. For some reason, the system just loves the numbers more than it loves names. So that's how, you usually quote program statements. Again, you're going to see that later on in your training. Okay, so let's move forward here. So they're saying here the purpose and scope of this administrative remedy program is to allow incarcerated folks, I'm not going to say the word inmate, at least I'm going to try my best not to seek formal review of an issue relating to any aspect of his or her confinement. Right? Again, anything, any issue that you may have, they are allowed to raise it and raise it here, right? It says an incarcerated person may not submit a request or appeal on behalf of another incarcerated person. Well, what does that mean? David, we've heard that you have done administrative remedies on behalf of others in prison. and there are others who claim to do such things. And here it is, right off the rip, there is a part of this program statement that's saying that you can't submit a request on behalf of another. So how were you guys doing that? That is a legitimate question, and students have asked a couple of times, so I'm addressing it. And the answer is that we are not submitting the document for the person or on behalf of the person. We didn't do that in the prison system because you couldn't. The rules doesn't allow for it, and we as the Remedy Project are not going to do that either because the rules doesn't allow for it. What is allowed, however, is for us to help the person prepare the remedy, right? So we could help the person, the individual, prepare the administrative remedy process. We could do the entire thing for them, but then we must turn it over to the incarcerated person with the issue for them to submit it themselves. Right, and they're the ones that submit it. They turn it over to the unit counselor, warden, regional and or central office, themselves. And that's how it's supposed to be done. It must come from the individual. It can't come from an outside source or another source, right? So that's what that's talking about. Um, this next paragraph here talks about sexual abuse. I'll address that now. Anything that's sexual abuse, sexual harassment related is a no tolerant situation within the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and it does not need or require the administrative remedy process to raise such an issue. And staff must take any issues raised, um, within the context of sexual harassment, sexual abuse, extremely seriously. And unfortunately, they don't always. But they are supposed to, according to separate law, Prison Rape Elimination Act. According to that law, they're supposed to, and so therefore there is no need for a remedy. However, my professional advice is that yes, a person always uses the remedies to raise issues. And so if they get a chance to file an administrative remedy on an act, a claim of sexual harassment or sexual abuse, they should. They should fill that document out and turn it over. But according to prior laws, you don't have to do that. Um, you know, right? So we're gonna see more stuff like that about sexual harassment, sexual abuse in here, and I'm going to breeze over it and or not deal with it. Let me give you the explanation. If someone reaches out to the Remedy Project about sexual harassment, sexual abuse, we don't have to do a remedy on their behalf. We could simply do a letter uh, talking about the person's issue, and that we became aware of it. And we usually would then send a couple of those letters off to some of the most important offices, internal affairs, central, regional offices, and so on, alerting them of this situation, and and then having them do the rest on that, right? Because they're supposed to take that seriously. Um, and then again, if the individual requires it, or if we could, yes, we will do remedies later on. But the most important thing is to bring that to the person's attention, and we don't need the remedy process to do that. All right. So that just covered the sexual abuse stuff here. I'm going to move on. Again, I'm going to skip over most of that as we continue. Scope. This program applies to all incarcerated individuals in institutions operated by the Bureau of Prisons, whether they are designated to contract community correction centers, or commonly called halfway houses, under Bureau of Prisons responsibility, and or former uh, incarcerated folks for issues that arose during their confinement. This program does not apply to incarcerated folks confined in other federal facilities. Let me address a couple of these lines here. So once a individual is confined or housed within any section or part of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, they should have access to this program statement. They're supposed to use this method, and the prisons are supposed to provide them, and or institutions are supposed to provide everyone with the ability to do that, even halfway houses. Even a person on home confinement should have access to the administrative remedy process. Of course, however, this is generally not the case because it's suppressed and or not taught to folks when they get to halfway houses and on home confinement, that they still have access to this process and that it can be utilized. It's just a few that are knowledgeable or have an idea about the process and the system would maybe be aware of that, but the majority of folks are not. And again, staff do not go out of their way to educate folks on the fact that they have to use this system or it's still available to them, because they don't want to do the work of having to address the stuff. They don't want to do the work of having the administrative remedy process fall on their records and stuff like that, because they're the ones who neglected an incarcerated person or messed up or whatever. They don't want that drama and those issues. They don't want the work. So they're not educating folks on how to use this process, right? And so that's why it's little known of out there in to that capacity. But anywhere a person is confined within the Federal Bureau of Prisons, once again, they should have access to this process and can use it. All right, and if they get access to the documents, they can file. So the Remedy Project would assist folks with this process, no matter where they're at, whether they're on home confinement or all the way in a supermax prison, all the way up to a supermax prison. We would assist the folks with that, right? It says here, and former incarcerated folks can also use this pertaining to something that was happened to them in their system. That one is rare because you're already released from prison and you have an issue that happened in prison that you want to raise. It's kind of hard to bring that issue up unless it's an issue that you want to take to court. Because what would then happen is that staff would 9 times out of 10 respond to your situation as well, probably we take allegations or whatever seriously, but hey, you're no longer in prison anymore, so that kind of like whatever issue it is you may be having is mute, right, with the system, because it's over. You're not with us anymore, so we don't have to, or there's no way we could address your situation, right? That's probably going to be the stance of the prison system. So unless it's a court issue that you or an issue worthy of court, like you're suing for damages or something like that, and even then, now that you're out of prison, you don't have to use the process. You could actually go straight to court and file the paperwork, right? But the rules here said that you can use it. You know, I don't think much folks pay attention to that or aware of that. And like I said, it probably won't make any sense because the Bureau is probably going to hit you with, hey, I know you had this issue over here, but you're out of prison now and you're not having that issue anymore. Or, that issue is now mute because it's resolved because you're not here anymore. So nothing is happening to you, or it's resolved, right? And that's probably going to be their stance. All right, so I'm going to skip over this section here and go down this program statement to other parts that are important. Section 542.11 here talks about the responsibility to establish the administrative remedy process for the incarcerated folks to utilize and it talks about the individuals and or locations of these individuals that are responsible for making sure that happens. So a warden is supposed to make sure that his facility has a proper um, administrative remedy process set up. Um, each prison usually has their own, well, not their own. We'll get to it when we get to the BP8s or informal resolutions. A lot of them have their own separate ones. Um, but the process is the same across the board, but they're supposed to make sure that incarcerated folks have access to it. Fortunately, that's not always the case. Majority of times, it's hindered, horribly. But yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. The regional director, of course, is responsible for the warden on down. The general counsel is responsible for the regional director, the warden on down. Community corrections manager, CMC, is responsible for that process. Usually, that person is not in the mix that much. When remedies are done, they're submitted to a counselor who then takes it to wherever it goes to in the informal resolution. But when it gets to the BP9, it's now a warden issue, or if you're at a halfway house, it's now the director of the halfway house's issue. And then it moves on to maybe warden at a prison that the person was responsible for, or the region, um, and so on and so forth, if being exhausted. All right, so that's what this covers. That's good for you to read through that stuff. Again, I'm just pointing stuff out, introducing you to stuff. I want you to read this stuff, right? So this section 8 here says the unit manager is responsible for ensuring that incarcerated persons notices, receipts and extensions notices and receipt disregard notices from institutions, regions, and central office are printed and delivered daily for incarcerated folks um, based on their filings. What is that talking about? When an incarcerated person submits a BP9 level, 10 and 11 level to staff, and the administrative remedy coordinator and or clerk, as it says up here, is of these different institutions or these different levels supposed to input that into the Sentry system or the Bureau of Prison system, and then that system it generates a receipt, rejection notice, or whatever. The receipt usually tells the time that it was received and the date that a response should be expected. Um, that type of thing. And or if it's a rejection notice, it would tell the person, hey, we rejected your stuff and here's why, and it's given back to them. The unit manager is responsible for making sure that those are delivered. As I covered in the handbook, I reminded you guys or educated you guys that the unit manager is responsible for all things pertaining to the person on the unit. And so therefore, it's the unit manager's job to make sure that that system works properly. Who usually delivers these receipts? Anyone on the unit team can. So, you know, I've seen some staff deliver these uh, whenever they are generated, so on a daily basis. And then I've seen some staff come up with a system where they deliver them weekly, bi-weekly, and so on to incarcerated folks. Um, but yes, the rule is that they're supposed to be provided to the incarcerated person in a timely manner. Um, Unfortunately, though, the majority of the folks, the staff in the system, don't even provide these receipts. There are some folks who know what the remedy process is, but because their prison system don't provide them the receipts, they don't even know that that exists. So sometimes I'll be talking to a person, I say, okay, go ask the counselor, tell them you want a receipt for your filing. And they go, what? What receipt? What are you talking about? Because they don't know. All they just heard about the remedy process. And now you're helping them out with it. And now you're telling them about a receipt that they never heard of. Right? So, yeah, these are things that are there. This section here will tell you about the unit manager and about delivering them on time to all folks who they're responsible for, right? Because I taught you that in the handbook. All right, so incarcerated persons have the responsibility to use this program in good faith and in honest and straightforward manner. I laugh at that. Why am I laughing? Well, because we are all human beings. We are all human beings, and there are some folks who are incarcerated who would reach out to you for help with utilizing this process that might be trying to take advantage of the system in some form or fashion. That happens. That happens. There are some folks who get legitimate incident reports but don't want to suffer the consequences, and they'll reach out to you and ask you, "Hey, can you help me with this? I need to file a remedy. I need to challenge this," and or they might have they might think that they want something, and they might know that the rule says that they can't have it, but they might just say, "No, I don't want to accept that. Maybe I'll be the one to change things. I want to ask for this. I want them to tell me no, or I want them to explain to me why I personally can't get it." And the truth is that no matter which of these individuals you are, that it is either one that's going to waste the time, your time, and the staff's time to file something that everyone knows they can't have, or it's not going to turn out to be anything fruitful, or someone who is trying to get around the system or do something that they're not supposed to, or get relief from something that they felt like they might have been punished too severely for, or they might not want to be punished for at all, even though they did it. It doesn't matter which one of those folks that come across. My stance has always been that it is the incarcerated person's right to utilize this process, the administrative remedy process, no matter what their position is. And so I assist them. I have assisted them in filing administrative remedies. It is the warden's job and or the prison system's job to tell these folks, by responding to them uh, correctly through the administrative remedy process, that, hey, you are not allowed to have this, or what you're trying is not going to work, or you were sanctioned correctly and this is why, and or I know you think you deserve to be a more lenient sanction, and we agree, here it is, or no, we don't. So, whatever, it is the system's job to respond. It is the staff's job to respond. It is not the job of the folks who are helping those to do these remedies to decide for them that you shouldn't do this. So what I would usually do, and everyone else could follow suit if they decide to. I know the Remedy Project carries this stance, is if a person reaches out and we understand that, hey, this is a waste of time, or it's not going to work, or whatever the issue is that we would explain to the individual the best that we can that, hey, the system here is right, the warden is right, or what you're seeking is not possible. However, if you still want to go ahead and do this, if we have the time, we'll do it for you. If not, we'll put it on the back burner and deal with stuff from other folks that is more important. So that's usually the stance that we'll take, right, here at the Remedy Project. I'm not big on telling folks, no, you can't do that, or you shouldn't file that, right? It's their right. It's their right to get a response from the staff that they can't do that, not from me. All right. Okay, so now we are at Informal Resolution, section 542.13. Informal Resolution. Except as provided in 542.13b, an incarcerated person shall present an issue of concern informally to staff. Shall means must. Okay, and staff shall or must attempt to informally resolve the issue before an incarcerated person submits a request for administrative remedy. Okay, I hear that. Well, what is all of that? What are we talking about here? Again, here it says the warden shall establish procedures to allow folks to follow this, right? To follow this process. So informal resolution, what is this? It's a part of the process. I would tell you it's the first part of the administrative remedy process because it's required. It says that you shall do it. You shall file an informal resolution and staff shall respond. And just so that you know, it's those words there that is what gives the informal resolution and or the administrative remedy process the oomph, the bite that it has when it comes to getting things resolved. Because if you reach out to staff any other way, um, like through emails, um, or there's another thing that they like you to use called a cop out. It talked about the cop out in the handbook. Yeah, we covered the cop out in the handbook, and I explained that the cop out is not smart. It's a waste of time. It wastes the time of the individuals, especially if the staff members are not interested in helping and or resolving the issue. But once you go straight to the informal resolution, it's kind of like saying, hey, I mean business. I need this, or this is a problem, and I mean business in getting it done, in getting it taken care of, and staff is going to take you up on that business, or let's say they're supposed to. Right? We all know we complain about it all the time, and I'm going to harp on it all the time because it's a fact that they hinder the process and they don't help folks out like they're supposed to. All right, so back to what is an informal resolution. And an informal resolution basically is in the prison system, is a series of forms that I know you can't see this properly. I am going to put it up on the screen a little better for folks also, and these are going to be in your training packet also. All right, you're going to be able to see that. But what I have here is a couple different informal resolution forms that are created by different prisons to be handed out to incarcerated persons for them to fill out. All right, and so each prison has one. They have codes on them. Again, you can't see this, but I'll show you. This one is from Three Rivers Prison. I have from McKean here. Um, I also have from Farrington, New Jersey, different federal prisons. These informal resolutions. So this is basically what they look like. It's just a page that has information on it. This is a general one. And the incarcerated person will put their name, their register number, of course, which is more important in the system for some reason, their unit, and then in this little space here, they're supposed to put, you know, uh, whatever their issue is, and it's supposed to say what efforts they made to had the issue attempted, and at the bottom here, staff says, gives a response. Now, what in the training you would see that you don't. This is not enough space to provide a full, comprehensive, proper administrative remedy claim. Period. Unless you got a simple claim like, hey, I'm having problems with this bunk. Can you switch me to a different bunk, please, or to a different cell, please? If your situation or your claim issue is that small, then yes, this one page is good enough to address that issue. But if you've been trying to get medical attention, like most of our folks, over a lengthy period of time, and staff has been ignoring you, and your situation is getting worse and stuff like that, you cannot put that issue in that space and present it to staff. You need attachment pages or continuation pages, as we call them at the Remedy Project, to have staff address your issue. And so we would use a numerous, how many ever we need, to make sure that the full argument of the incarcerated person is addressed. So that's basically what an informal resolution is. It's this page. You will learn how to fill this out later on. But again, that's the easy part, learning what it is and how to use it properly, and even how to get around the hindrances and how to guide the person that you're assisting to get around the hindrances, right? And how to do these in a way that when you do them prevents the staff from hindering them is pretty important, because we could submit one of these and then with 5 or 6 pages on it, and a staff member looking to do wrong would look at it and then take it from the person with, let's say, 10 pages, but take out 4 or 5 and submit on thing, or remove all the continuation pages and just submit the form. I've seen this stuff happen, and just submit the form, and then they just respond to whatever that little piece of information was on the form, denying the individual and or giving the individual what they want, because they didn't really want all of that information on the record, right? The informal resolution, when filed, does not have to go on individuals' records. They can get away from that, but when you hit the next level, which is the 9, the stuff definitely goes on everybody's record, right? Whoever is involved, right? So that's the what a BP8 informal resolution looks like, right? So it's called a BP8 or informal resolution. You'll see good copies of this in this video, and in the training, along with other training material. You will see those, right? All right. So again, it's the warden's responsibility to make sure there's a proper procedures in place for these administrative remedies, these informal resolutions, and when filed, they should be resolved or responded to within 5 to 7 days. If an incarcerated person does not receive a response within 5 to 7 days, you should be directing them back to the counselor to retrieve their informal resolution with a response, either getting their response that they're looking for or not, or saying that, okay, you guys don't want to address the issue, at least please write in the response section that I submitted it and that I did not get a response, and that way the incarcerated person could now move on to the next step. All right. Exceptions to filing these, you got to be one of the most common with these in failing to file them in a timely manner. The incarcerated person failing to raise an issue in a timely manner, I should say, is if they are in transit. Usually they have an issue and then they're being shipped, and that is a legitimate excuse for not getting that done in time, and or being at the hospital or something, being severely sick or bedridden, and that they incapacitated and they can't do a remedy at that point in time on their own. They can then turn around and submit an informal resolution, the beginning of the process, when they can, but they would need to show that by getting a letter from staff, usually a unit team member, all right, saying, we agree that this is the reason why this remedy or this informal resolution is late, is because this individual was incapacitated, this individual was in a hospital, or they were in transit, or whatever, right? And you will see that that's a part of the program statement. As you read through, you would see that somewhere in here. Right, for example, one may waive informal resolution, right? So if it's a UDC issue and or DHO issue, these things are part of the inmate disciplinary program, which is another program statement, the very next video that we're going to get into. I'm going to walk you through that one also. That stuff pertaining to that, wardens could waive and so on. That's what this stuff is talking about here. I'm not going to focus on that. That stuff falls under the disciplinary program. You're going to see that anyway. All right. So now we come to section 542.14, initial filing. Initial filing. When I hear initial filing, I hear beginning of the process. How could it be the beginning of the process when I must do this one first? I don't get it, but hey, that's what they say. So this is the initial part of the process, right? And it says the deadline for completion of informal resolution, which is the beginning of the process in my eyes, and the submission of a formally written administrative remedy request on the appropriate form BP9 is 20 calendar days following the date of which the basis of the request occurred. Right? So any issue an individual is raising on this informal resolution, this is the beginning in my eyes, not in theirs, but in mine. All right, they have to do this first and submit it to staff. And when they do this, they have to do this within close proximity of them becoming aware that they have an issue. On January 1st, an incarcerated person realizes that there was, let's say, the food was bitter, right? Something was wrong with the lunch meal that was given to them. That individual, that individual has to raise that issue within 20 calendar days on the BP9 form, which is this form. It's a blue form, carbon copy pages. It has four copies in here, right? This is how this is. It's carbon copy paper, and the incarcerated person fills their name, number, institution, unit, and in this section here, they're supposed to say what their issue is, sign and date, and submit to the unit counselor so that the unit counselor can then turn it over to the unit manager. Sorry, not the unit manager, the warden, sorry. However, this one has to be done first. And so when it's being submitted, actually these two are submitted together, the 9 above the 8, right? So your 8 informal resolution with a response most of the time needs to be attached to your 9, and it's submitted that way and in 20 calendar days. So if that person said, hey, I got food on January 1st and it was bitter, it made my stomach upset, I was throwing up and stuff, I got a problem with that, I'm raising that to your attention. They need to do that, file a BP8 on that, unless they were seriously incapacitated for a period of time, within, I would say, the first 2 to 3 days of that incident happening, in order to fall in line with this, to fulfill this. Because when they do that, submit that 8 within that timing, they then have to wait for a response, which I said usually staff usually sees a good time to respond to that is 5 to 7 business days, or 5 to 7 days period, that they need to respond to that. And then once they get their informal resolution response, now the incarcerated person has to address that response, and or whatever else needed within the same issue, on that 9, and have it submitted to the counselor before the 20th of January. All right. Otherwise, if it's after that, it's late. And whether that person had a legitimate bellyache or not, or got sick or not, it doesn't matter. If they don't do that within that 21 days and that bellyache had went away, then they are time barred as according to this program statement that it must be done within 20 days, and they no longer can raise that issue. That issue is now dead. All right, according to the rules and regulations, the warden doesn't have to accept it. He can reject it, saying that it's untimely, or he can accept it and respond to it, saying that it's untimely, and so they don't have to address the issue. All right, and so that's very important to follow these timelines, these guidelines, when it comes to time. So I just showed you informal resolution and the BP9 form, the blue form, what it is. We will cover that stuff in more detail and in more depth later on in training. Let's move on to extensions. Um, an extension to file, again, if you're in transit, if you were sick, incapacitated in some form or fashion, you can ordinarily, down here it said ordinarily, get verification, which is written verification or memo from staff. I would say, let's make that clear. The incarcerated person can go to staff and get a memo from staff saying, hey, I was incapacitated, I was in transit, whatever the issue is, and I need an extension, an excuse to get past that 20-day deadline, because this was the reason. And staff would say, check that out and say, okay, yeah, you're right, this was the case, it was the issue. And they will give them that memo most of the time to do that. I've seen some staff members just don't want to help a person or make life hard and not want to turn over that memo. But most of the time it's done. I've seen it done many times, right? It's what's supposed to be done, and staff usually would do that. Very important. If an incarcerated person requests an administrative remedy form but has not attempted the informal resolution, so if you're requesting the 9, the blue form, and you have not done the 8, the paper form, right? Staff is not allowed to tell you that you can't file the 9. A whole lot of them do though, right? Yes, you're supposed to do the 8 first. It's, but the rules allow for you to come with a 9 if you believe that the informal resolution is not necessary, and or you have a proper excuse to bypass that. But a lot of staff wouldn't follow these guidelines here and just blatantly not accept a 9 without an 8 attached, unless they realize that, hey, this is a situation that does not excuse the want of an informal resolution, or that they realize that an informal resolution is actually needed in this situation, and the person doesn't want to do it but is submitting the 9 alone. They'll take the 9 and submit it, knowing that the warden would reject it, right? So it's a little bit of back and forth with folks on this here, but a lot of times staff uses this to hinder the process. They should provide the 9 to the individual once the individual requests the 9, whether they done an 8 or not. But a lot of times staff will just won't give the person the BP9, and they have to go through other means to get it. All right, I've experienced that a lot personally. Okay, yeah, so that's another thing to pay attention to. I just covered that because it's important. So there's a bunch of other things that's more in depth in when it comes to doing the remedies, but those we'll cover in the other training on how to do the remedies, right? So right now we are sticking with the program statement, so we're not going to get fall off track here. Okay, this section here, this information here is important, right? It says the incarcerated person shall place a single complaint or reasonable number of closely related issues on the form. If the incarcerated person includes on a single for multiple unrelated issues. This submission shall be rejected and returned without responses, and the incarcerated person shall be advised to use a separate form for each unrelated issue. All right, and then it says it's for DHO, UDC appeals, each separate incident report. All right, that last section there, DHO and UDC appeals, that's a part of the disciplinary process, and we'll see that later on. But let's address this section here because this is a very important issue that you, the person who is assisting the individual incarcerated, should know and understand. A person would be going through so much stuff in the prison system and are frustrated by all that they're going through, and then eventually would snap and say, I can't take it anymore, let me file a remedy. Right, so they might have been dodging this all along because they don't want to they fear retaliation. They don't want staff to retaliate and take away their visits or their commissary and stuff, make their life uncomfortable. And so they might be dodging an issue or two, raising an issue or two, but then it gets overbearing and overwhelming. They snap, and then they come to you and they say, hey man, I'm tired of this nonsense. Let me file this a remedy. I need you to help to do a remedy. And you say, okay. And then they hit you with everything, including the kitchen sink, like they say, right? They got hit you every issue, right? So they might have a legitimate issue that they went down to the visiting room and them and their family members were treated horribly by a staff member. That's common, right? And that might have been the breaking point for them, right? But then they tell you that issue, and then they start telling you about how much they hate the food and how much it's not doing good for them and how it makes them sick every now and again. And then they will start telling you about the fact that the prison staff is not providing the right amount of materials for them to keep their cell and or dorm sanitized, and that another staff member is mean to them, and that their boss at work is trying to fire them, and that 2 years ago this incident happened, and that's still on their mind, and so on and so forth. It happens all the time. We could go into the remedy projects system of letters, initial letters by incarcerated folks, and bring that up, and we'll show you where when they realize, oh, you guys help with administrative remedies, oh, I need help with that, and they hit us with everything. They got a bunch of issues. It is for you to know that you cannot help, or you're not going to help them by raising every issue that they've provided on the same remedy. They would do that a lot of times. They would get their hands. Oh, they heard about the remedy, and like I said, that's a common situation. They refrain from filing, and then all of a sudden they fed up, and now they want to file, and they'll get a remedy, and they'll try to, in small little pieces, bursts of statements, they'll come raise every issue, say everything that's been bothering them on an informal resolution N9, and submit it. And it will be rejected, and that whole entire thing is dead. Sometimes the staff would tell her, hey, you need to, it's too many issues here, you need to file them separately. The person might understand that and do it, but a lot of the times, the majority of times, the stuff dies right then and there because folks are not trained or doesn't understand how to utilize the system properly, right? So what do? We, or you, the individual that's looking at helping these folks with these remedies, have to be able to look at what they submit, the things that they're complaining about, and separating them, right? And into separate issues for filing. Now, so the issue about the visiting room is one, right? Anything that they might have on food service is two. That's two separate filings, and so on and so forth. If they have something on medical, that's three, right? It's a separate filing, and so on and so forth. So you must keep those things separate. Now, what is a closely related issue, or what aspect does that come up where you could have multiple issues on one informal resolution and or administrative remedy? Well, let me give you an example. It all depends on, let's say, um, the way things went down. All right. So, for instance, using the same example as earlier, where an individual gets um, a food tray that they ate and it made them sick. They were throwing up and vomiting and so on and so forth. Um, that individual, has been sick. And the individual then puts in a cop out, or puts in a request by email or whatever the channels are to, or they go to some, in some cases the individual could go to the medical department and say, hey, I'm having an issue here. I ate this food on Monday and I've been sick for 2, 3 days. I've been vomiting, I got diarrhea, whatever, and it doesn't seem to be going away, and I need help. And let's say the staff member now at medical then turns around and says, well, oh, you just got a stomach bug or whatever, man. Man up. What you come over here crying about that stuff for? This stuff happens all the time. Man up and get away from here and go back and, and deal with that. You know, don't come over here. I got too much to do. I got more people with more serious stuff to do. And you coming over here crying about a little stomach ache. Man up and take that and go back to your cell, and don't worry about it. You'll get better. Right? Now, we both know that could be food poisoning. And the person might be dying, right? Slowly. But staff member just was rude and disrespectful and unprofessional. And it's a medical staff, so it's a medical issue. That's a whole separate issue on by itself, right? A medical issue, failure to assist and or provide medical in accordance with policy. Um, then you have unprofessional conduct and behavior by that staff member. That's two separate issues. And then the food service providing the food that made the person sick in the first place, and they're going through what they're going through. That's three issues, three separate issues, but all three of them can be placed on one administrative remedy and complained about and addressed separately on one remedy. Why? Because they are closely related. It's like it's one situation flowing into another, right? So if the person didn't get the stomach ache, they would not have had to go to medical, to then be denied medical treatment and be treated by staff in a horrible manner. All right. So that's kind of like a flowing situation, and that's the kind of situations that you have to look for when you receive information from the incarcerated person seeking help. That's the type of thing you look for to see if you have these fluid situations, and that stuff is closely related issues that can be raised in one remedy. Anything else that is not tying to each other like that is and would be considered separate issues and should be filed separately. Okay, and if not, can be and will be rejected by staff. And in some cases, when you do have, I've done it. In some cases, I've done it where even like a closely related issue, like I just explained, I would simply just do three remedies. If I, I was incarcerated and I had the time, right? So I'll write up all three issues and put them under pressure, give them some extra work that they hated to do, right? But because I had, that was my rec. I had nothing else. Um, but you know, at this point in time for the remedy project and what we do, I would not recommend that unless I know maybe the prison system is troublesome or so. But that closely related issue all in one is a good approach. And even sometimes when you do that, a staff would then reject it, saying, "Oh, well, you got more than one issues." But that is a wrongful rejection when they do that for that type of thing. But if you complain about medical and food service at the same time about separate different things, and you put that on one remedy, no, that's an automatic rejection and or issue dead until you bring it back properly. All right. Let me move on here. Incarcerated person shall complete the form with all requests identifying information and shall state complaint in the space provided on the form. If more space is needed, the incarcerated person may use up to one letter size uh, page, continuation page. Okay, that's very important. We're going to cover this also later on in the in your training, but I want to show you this here because it's important, right? Because this is used to hinder folks a lot also, right? So this is your form, your administrative remedy form, um, that it's talking about, right? This whole section is covering everything pertaining to this BP9, right? That I've covered so far, right? And an incarcerated person's in stuff is supposed to be placed here. The information, right, that they're complaining about is supposed to be placed in this space. Now, that is not enough space to make a valid argument. Again, unless you're looking for something simple. Hey, you guys didn't give me any cleaning supplies this week. Could I please have some cleaning supplies so that I could clean my room? Um, and you would have done that on the informal resolution, and you would have gotten a response that you don't like, and then you could simply put that information right here. Again, it's the same information. It would fit right in this section here, on this 9, and then you turn that into the counselor again to submit to the warden with both pages, with the BP8 attached, and that would be sufficient. Now, if you have, again, a year or 2 years of medical neglect and denial, and so on, of medical issues that you have to cover. You have to cover all these incidents and name all the different staffs and so on who was involved and who neglected you, and you want to raise that issue. If you try to raise that here, you're not going to have enough space. You're going to do yourself an injustice. And so what this information here is saying is that if you're using the BP9 form and you need more space than what is here, you're then allowed to use to continue from the 9 onto one page, and this one blank page here is going to be called your continuation page, right? And you're only allowed one. So if you run out of space on the form, and then you continue here and you get to the end of this page and you still have more information to go, you're dead. You don't, right? Don't put it, because they're going to reject the 9 because you got too many continuation pages. You got to shorten it, right? So, best practice, no matter what, even if I know, and that's what we train folks here at the Remedy Project to do, is that even if you know that you don't need an informal resolution and you could go straight to a 9, I suggest still using the informal resolution. Put the issue on the informal resolution. Why? Because there are no page limits and or restraints on the informal resolution. If you look at it, it say that you just must attempt the informal resolution, right? And you can use continuation pages on an informal resolution, as many as you need to put forth your proper argument, right? So if it takes you 100 continuation pages on an informal resolution to get your argument sufficiently across, your issue sufficiently across the staff for them to address it, then that's what you do. You use 100 pages. But when you get to the 9, whatever you're putting on the 9 must fill this space and one a continuation page, and you stop. So in essence, you would have your your 9, your continuation page, and then your BP8 attached with your 100 pages, if that's what you use, right? And that's how and that's how that would be submitted properly. Staff love to tell incarcerated persons, based on this rule, that is for, right? And so let me show you, and make this clear, right? There is no page limitation or any kind of limitation on the informal resolution that you see in this section 542.13. There's no page limitation, right? Or anything like that. The limitations start coming inside of initial filing, which the initial filing is talking about the BP9. The initial filing is the BP9, right? And there are limitations here. This is where your limitations start. And this limitation that we're covering here on page limits, right? On the continuation page, and page limit, which is a page limit of one copy of supporting exhibits, right? So it must provide an additional copy of any continuation page. If more spaces is needed, then the incarcerated person may use up to 1 letter size continuation page, right? So it's in section 3, right? This is for the 9. It's for the 9, okay? That rule, that limitation, all these rules and these limitations are for the 9. They are not for the informal resolution BPA. However, staff continuously always tells incarcerated folks, when they see informal resolutions, especially properly done with enough continuation pages to get their point across, or to get their issue across, or to properly expose the issue that they are having, staff will always, oh no, you can't submit that, you got too many continuation pages, you got to go do something differently. And then what would happen is that incarcerated person sometimes believes that staff member, because they might have heard about it, because everybody who knows something about the administrative remedy process knows that it's only one continuation page for the 9, and then they will go and they'll take that page out, and they'll take their pages off and just have one continuation page, and their 8, their informal resolution, and then attach that to the 9, and now their informal resolution and or remedy is insufficient in what is needed to provide a proper remedy request. All right. Yeah. And that is it's a horrible thing that they do, and it's horrible that incarcerated folks don't know what I'm explaining to you here, and they just a lot of times end up ruining their whole remedy, if they even know how to do it properly. They mess it up because they didn't take pages out. I've done proper remedies for folks and given it to them to submit, send it off, mail it off to them, and they get it, and staff tells them that, and then they go take off all the continuation pages and just give the staff the first page of the informal resolution, and then the staff quickly denies it because there's not enough information to make their situation, to have their situation resolved, right? It's a bad thing that some staff members do, or a good bit of them. Not all of them, but a good bit of them. All right. Additional copies of pages. This stuff here is important. Additional copies of pages of any exhibits need to be submitted. So with these remedies, again, I will go through that in more detail. You read this here. When we're going through this in training, you would see it, and oh, okay, that's what that section was talking about. I got it. All right. That's what we're going to do. I'm not going to go into every little thing here, explaining all of it. Just what I think is important to knock out of the way in this training session here. Okay, I'm going to address sensitive issues in this document because there is a majority of incarcerated folks who might get their hands on administrative remedies, or this program statement, or have an awareness of this program statement, and would see this section here and would say to themselves, oh, I'm having problem with staff. Staff is after me. Staff is going to retaliate. I don't want staff to retaliate against me. So this is a sensitive issue. I'm going to follow this section and send this remedy to the regional office as sensitive, so that I could bypass staff here at the institution, so that the regional office could address this and come and help me, because I'm afraid of these folks here. Now, I would tell you something. That fear is a legitimate fear. Um, the fear of retaliation at the institution very, very much uh, a reality. All folks who file remedies usually go through some form of retaliation. Some staff are very good at not retaliating immediately. They'll probably go write it, write a date on a calendar, put a note. Okay, um, get this guy, get Simpson back for the filing he made on January 2nd. He'll be writing that in July, right? In July. I'll get Simpson back for that filing he made in January. And so they'll act like they forget about whatever that issue is. And then when there is something you need, something you deserve, uh, something you should get, some type of help that you need, and you go to that staff for, or they're responsible for giving it to you, they will say, ah, sucker, you remember, although they probably would even tell you, right? But that's what they're thinking. Sucker, you remember that remedy? I got you. You ain't get nothing. All right. I'm not doing nothing for you. I'm not helping you out. Nothing. Right? Staff do that. They're human beings. They're human beings. All human beings can be petty, and it's in their culture, and or mindset of staff of the prison system to retaliate and act petty against folks who are incarcerated. Remember, it's a us against them mentality, and so this it's a real fear. And they would try to go to the region and bypass the warden's office with the nine to get issues addressed, and they are usually rejected. I would say 99% of them are rejected, and rejected rightfully. Why am I saying that? Well, because this bar here, as this explains, I will give it to you in a better thing, in a more simpler explanation. The warden of a facility is responsible for everything going on at that facility, in staff and incarcerated individuals, and the property itself. And an incarcerated person must give that warden a chance to address whatever situation it is that he might have going on at that facility through this process, the administrative remedy process. The truth is, the warden could be disrespectful to you, the warden could curse you out, be unprofessional to you. You go to the warden, hey warden, I need this. Man, I ain't giving you, get the away from me. You know, he could even be prejudiced or discriminatory, right? So get away from me, um, you indigenous person, or or white boy, or Negro, whatever, right? The warden did something like that and chased an individual away. Even that would not be considered sensitive. The regional will reject the remedy if you wrote a 10 saying, hey, the warden did something like this to me, and I think it's sensitive because I fear retaliation. Because the warden is the one who did it. I fear retaliation and I'm coming to you. The region is going to reject that. Why? Because unless you are showing or providing information and or proof of some sort that you legitimately have some type of information that the warden is actually really going to retaliate against you for an issue, unless you're saying that in that remedy, it's not sensitive. So if you just say, hey, the warden was, the warden was biased or being racial towards me, okay, no problem. Tell the warden that he was doing that in the administrative remedy 9, file it there. We're rejecting it at the regional office. However, if you say to the region, hey, the warden was racial towards me, he called me out of my name, he disrespected me, and when I told him I was going to write him up, he said if he ever sees that I write him up or put a 9 or whatever, he's going to take that and throw it away, and he's going to put me in the shoe for 60 days. If you say that the warden said that to you, now you got a different story. Now you're showing that the warden is capable of or is interested in retaliating against you. Now you got a sensitive issue. And that is kind of like the gist of what sensitive is. If an assistant warden, a captain, other staff members are doing something to you in a prison system, folks who work in the system are friends and are buddies and colleagues, and they look out for one another. Even with that knowledge and understanding, it's not sensitive unless the warden is involved, unless you're claiming that the warden will be involved in some form of retaliation or threat against you. It's not sensitive. So it has to be one of those situations. So if you were assaulted by officers and the captain and the warden was right there and they saw the whole thing go down and they didn't say anything, and you want to file a sensitive 10, go ahead, right? Because the mere fact that you're saying that the warden was there and saw these folks beat you down and didn't do anything to intervene and or stop you says that the warden was a part of that. And so now you have an issue that is sensitive to the region. If you're not claiming that, if you're saying, well, the captain and these officers beat me down, and you don't say anything about the warden being a part of it, the regional office is going to expect you to file at 9 at the warden's office and give the warden a chance to address it. Okay, that's a big deal. I hope you guys understand that. You have to, because you're going to be doing remedies on behalf of folks, and you got to, when they reach out telling you, I need you to do a sensitive 10, you got to understand that a lot of times that's a waste of time. It kills time, because you do the 10, you send it to the region. Sometimes they reject it right away. Sometimes they hold on for it for their 30 days and then reject it, right? And you just wasted a whole bunch of time, right? So, letting the individual know that, hey, this is not a sensitive issue and you should file it at the warden's office is what's important. And here at the Remedy Project, we are designed to become the perfect advocate and or protection for folks from retaliation in the prison system in the near future, right? That's what we're building. We're building a network, an organization of students that will be the eyes and ears, the mouthpiece of those who are incarcerated. By being constantly involved in what's going on with them in the prison system and making sure that they're heard and that their situations are addressed. Appeals is very important. We're going to cover this a little bit. I know I've been rambling along. Yeah, you guys are tired of hearing my voice by now. When you guys are probably not even going to talk to me when this series is done. I'm like, nah, I don't want to hear this guy, man. I'm tired. All right. However, appeals. So you do your informal resolution, you do your 9, and you get a response from the warden on the 9 for the incarcerated person. What's next? It's the 10. It's a yellow form, similar to the 9, but it's yellow, carbon copy, 4 copies of it, right? Those of you who don't know how carbon paper works, when you write on top here, you got to press hard, you got to write on it hard, and it prints out whatever you write on the top page, prints out onto all the other bottom pages, right? if you do this and you don't do that properly, and the last page of the carbon copy does not have the information printed out on it properly down at the bottom, on the bottom page, this can be rejected for that. Any one of them can be rejected for that purpose. So whoever is filling these out need to fill it out properly and press down hard on your pen to make sure it the impression goes all the way through the last page. But you respond to a warden's denial, or appropriate response, or at this level. When there's rejections and so on, that stuff, we'll get into that uh, more in the actual training. I'm not going to cover that here, uh, but appeals, yes, right? So you do your appeal, you get your warden's response, and then you respond to the warden's response. In this section here, the same rules apply to the BP9. You get one continuation page, and then after you use that one continuation page, you're supposed to make 4 copies of it and put it on to the back of the 10. Why 4 copies? Because you got 4 copies of carbon paper here. You need 1 copy of each continuation page for each carbon paper, right? And so you do that. You then attach the warden's response. You then attach your blue BP9 form, and then you attach your informal resolution, BP8, along with any other exhibits for the regional. For the regional office, you attach 3 of all of those things. So 4 copies of your continuation page, and then everything else is 3 copies for the regional office. With your BP9, you attach 4 copies of your continuation page and 4 copies of everything else, right? That includes your informal resolution and exhibits, right? And you appeal that, and there's a time to appeal, time limit to appeal, which is here. You got to appeal within 30 days of the time of response that the warden responds. So let me say this. There's an issue there that you have to be aware of, you, the person who is helping the individual out with the remedies. When you see that warden's response, the warden response might be dated, let's say the 30th of January, and you got 20 calendar days from the warden's response to file your regional BP10, right, appeal. A lot of times it's a very frequent practice of staff, and sometimes it's just plain old, the process, documents moving around slow within the Bureau of Prisons. That happens. But a lot of times the warden would sign off on something, let's say on the 30th of January, and the individual will get the response, let's say on the 28th of February. What? And at that point in time that individual gets that response, they're out of time. They can't submit their BP10 within time because either illegitimately or legitimately there was an issue, staff didn't provide it on time, and now they can't respond to the region on time. If this issue happens, you need to be able to see it and identify it, because if you realize that you're past the time or you don't have enough time to get this remedy done, you need to make sure that the incarcerated person has provided you with initials or a signed initial or a date that is initialed by staff showing when they actually got that document from staff, right? That is what would help. The incarcerated person, a lot of times they don't know this, And sometimes they will call us up and say, hey, they just gave me this today and it's saying it was signed 30 days ago. And then I immediately inform them, okay, go find that officer, go back to that person who just gave you that, and tell them, could they please date it and initial it the time that they gave it to you. And that would suffice for the next level, the regional level and or the central level, as an excuse for the date that you actually got the, because you have, so it then says you now have the 20 days from the date that the document was given to you, right? So if they brought it 5 days late and you get them to initial it with the date, which was 5 days later, your 20 days to respond is now from that date that it was initiated, right? If you don't have any of that, and you can't get any of that, and staff gives you this your response late, which a lot of times they do, knowing, trying to hinder you, trying to make you submit late, so the issue then dies, it gets rejected and it's dead. You're in a jam. So you got to be aware of this, and you got to be able to identify this when it's happening and inform the incarcerated person to go back to staff quickly and get a memo or initial the document saying that when it was given to them, so that you could then provide that information to the regional office, so that the information does not die, it gets there on time. All right. So this is the appeals, right? Which appeals cover the 10 and the 11, right? And so I'm gonna show you the 11, right? So you have the regional director. This is appeals to the regional director, is the yellow form. Appeals to the central office. This is a pink form, right? It's the same kind of paper, carbon paper. All the same rules apply as the rules on the 10, and you need to submit these on time. You need to follow all these guidelines here to submit them. So this appeal information is the same for the regional director and for the central office, right? The time frames, pages, all of that is the same, okay? All right, another very important section that we need to cover, one of the most important sections of all, because you, the individual who is watching these long informational videos by this dude called David Simpson and the Remedy Project, Criminal Justice Realm, who you getting sick and tired of, is for what purpose? Well, is so that you could learn to assist these folks. And there you go, assistance. What gives you the right to be able to assist these folks? Why can't the prison system say, hey, you can't help this guy? What are you doing? He's in prison. You're not. He got to do this by himself. Well, there's a rule right here that says that they can assist, right? It says here, an incarcerated person may obtain assistance from another incarcerated person or from institution staff in preparing a request or an appeal. And let me just tell you right away, it's just their first part. Incarcerated people help incarcerated people. Those, the very, very few of us who know, would assist others on the process. It's very, very few of us who know about this process and know how to use it. And it's even fewer of us who know how to do it properly and sufficiently. And I am in an elite class when it comes to getting around all the hindrances that the prison system will throw at you. Some of the best, even paralegals and prison lawyers, when the prison staff starts hindering their process, they get jammed or stuck, and they don't know how to get their remedy through all the way to the end, to the central office to address on record. I am one of the very few, because of my studying them, my constantly challenging them, my relentless, didn't want to give up, my no give up attitude. I learned all their hindrances and learned how to get around them, and actually implemented a lot of those tactics in my training you on how to do remedies, so that simple tactics that they would normally use, we're eliminating them by just doing simple processes, in the training, right? And in your helping them when you're putting together your remedy. So yeah, and so I'm saying that to say incarcerated folks have been helping others and they are allowed to, and that is in accordance with this rule, right? Institutional staff helping folks prepare a remedy, never heard of it, never seen it. That stuff is not real. And I would think that if a staff member was assisting an incarcerated person to do remedies and other staff found out about it, or that would not be a happy camper. He would be a traitor. He would be a traitor, a turncoat. They'll probably try to fire that joker, right? No, you don't do that. It's the mentality is staff against incarcerated, not staff against staff, right? It's staff against the incarcerated. So staff does not join the other side, which is the incarcerated, to do remedies that might affect staff, right? That just isn't, no, they're not going to go for it. It doesn't happen. Yes, there are good staff members who would stand up on behalf of an incarcerated person every now and again because of some form of tie. Maybe they know the person back in the community, maybe the person is just simply from their area, maybe the person is their race, maybe just feel sorry for the individual, whatever. Maybe they just have a good relationship with the individual on the unit and believes that the individual is being taken advantage of, and they don't want to see that happen to that particular individual, and they would stand up for that individual every once in a blue moon. But the majority of time they turn their head or they stick their head in the sand, and folks are taken advantage of or neglected and or abused. And that's why the system is so horrible, right? And so if that's their common practice, is to stick their head in the stand or look away and allow the abuse and the neglect and stuff to go on, what in the world makes you think that they're going to help an incarcerated person with a remedy? I've never seen it. All my ten years of doing this in prison, well, it's more now. I'm doing it on the outside. I'm still working remedies with the administrative remedy process, right? So I've been doing this for about 15 years. Oh, 15 years now. I've never seen a staff member or heard of a staff member helping a person write a remedy. If it has ever happened, it's kept on the low. It's secret, you know. Yeah, and who trained the staff member on how to do it? Maybe the staff member is a part of the process. And no, I don't get it. I don't think it's ever happened. I would need to see that with my own two eyes. Yeah, so pay no attention to that. Staff is not helping anyone with remedies. However, let's continue here. It says, an incarcerated person may also obtain assistance from outside sources, such as family members or attorneys, right? And that's where we fall into, right? We're the community. We are allowed to assist our family members who are incarcerated, and we are a non-profit organization, a legitimate organization with an attorney on board, that gives us more than enough qualification to assist folks who are incarcerated with their remedies. And so this is the statement here, the part of the remedy process that powers us to do what we do. So, the Bureau of Prisons and or the federal government can't come to us and say cease and desist from doing what you're doing because it's illegal. Right? No, they can't do that because it is legal based on this statement here, right? They got to go change this law to stop us. All right. However, no person may submit a request or appeal on the incarcerated person's behalf, right? Again, what is the submitting? That's just simply the turning over of the document that is prepared to the counselor, the unit manager, the warden, the regional office, and or the central office. It has to come from the person with the issue. It can't come from anyone else, right? That's all that simply means. And obtain assistance, this is another important line. And obtaining assistance will not be considered a valid reason for exceeding a time limit for submission unless the delay was caused by staff. So, This is one of the most important things and or hurdles the remedy project itself has to deal with, is the fact that if we don't have enough staff members, volunteers, remedy writers on board to assist all the requests that are coming into us for help, there is the likelihood, and it has happened, unfortunately, where remedies are not going to be done in time to be sent back to these folks, and it becomes time barred and they can't raise that issue again in that regular form or fashion. That has happened, unfortunately, and it hurts us when it does. And that's why it's important for folks to go through this process, to learn this process, and be a part of the team that is willing to assist folks, and and hopefully stick around doing it for a while, right? Even after you finish college and moving on, maybe you reach out and you do a remedy twice a month or something instead of every week as you would do when you're in college. It's important, to push back against the system, right? So we have a system set up to make sure that our stuff comes in and goes out on time. But unfortunately, it's going to happen where snail mail, the post office, stuff gets to us late, and or we get it and we didn't get to it on time, and so on. But the majority of time, we get a lot of our important remedies out. We give some remedies. We know how to identify remedies that need to be placed in the immediate pile to do, and the ones that we can take a little bit of time. I know it says that, and I was explaining earlier that a lot of remedies can be time barred if they are not done within 20 days of the time that the individual became aware of the situation. But however, there is an override, let me use that for now, to that 20-day, and that is when a situation is ongoing. So, for instance, let me give you an example. I'm going to use the same example I used earlier. An incarcerated person gets food from the chow hall. He gets sick. He's throwing up. 3 days pass. He doesn't file. 20 days pass. Let's say he goes to medical. Medical takes a couple, 20 days to respond. He doesn't file. uh, Medical takes him to the hospital because he's so sick. He's saying, I'm so sick, I can't do anything. Medical finally takes him to the hospital. The hospital sends him back. They give him antibiotics, whatever, to treat his situation. And let's say it's a month and a half later, and he's now being able to get up and function properly. He lost a lot of weight. This was a serious situation. He can then file that remedy late, 2 months later, by saying, hey, my sickness was ongoing, or my issues were ongoing from that date. So it started on this date, but it's been ongoing ever since. Now he's filing 2 months after that issue, but he's filing saying that, hey, I've had this problem up until that time, and it's not been addressed properly, and I'm raising it now on this issue because I can, right? And that eliminates that 20 days. That's another big thing that folks don't know to use to get around um, remedies from being time barred. So, but that we use and that I've used skillfully for my time in prison and others. Once an issue is ongoing, they cannot time bar you, right? But if the issue just happened and it went away and you didn't address it on time, you're dead after 20 days. All right. So yeah, I think that's all I had for that situation there. Um, Resubmission. Um, I would cover this resubmission. This is not necessarily important uh, to us at this moment. You could be trained on this tactic while doing your other actual physical training, but resubmissions and how to do these properly, I'll get you on it. But you can read this and you will learn about it. But I'll physically show you the technique when we're doing the remedies. Appeal of rejections, something that you should know. I'm not going to stay here covering it. Um, Response times, something you definitely should know. You should definitely understand this. You need to read this. This is extremely important stuff. The time limits and constraints of filing remedies. I covered a lot of it in the training so far, but it's important. Again, read through this stuff. Access to indexes and responses is not that important for us. You should read that section probably once. You're not going to need it that much. And exhaustion of administrative remedies. The exhaustion of administrative remedy is to take it from informal resolution all the way to the BP11 and or central office filing. That's what that means. To appeal all the way up, right? And you could do that whether they are legitimately responding and or addressing your issue. The incarcerated person still has a right to exhaust their remedy all the way to the central office. And if they don't, even if staff is legitimately addressing your issue, it might be an issue where that individual can be compensated for whatever it is they were suffering, but now the prison is taking care of it. And the prison would like you to believe that, hey, now that we're taking care of this, the issue is gone and done with, and so there's no more need for you to file. Not true. Because if you don't exhaust all the way to the courts, then you can't go to the courts and say, hey, I need you to help me get compensation from the Federal Bureau of Prisons because I file and they address the stuff and I filed the 9 and the 10 and they were addressing it, so I didn't bother to file the 11. Well, you didn't exhaust your remedy, and so therefore the court would deny you, right? Again, even if the responses are good and correct, in some cases, especially where a person is looking for compensation of for damages or being neglected or whatever, and they're planning on going to court, you should exhaust the remedy. It needs to go all the way to the 11, unless you can show, unless you could prove that staff has hindered the process. And you need to prove to the court and show to the court that the staff was hindering the process and making it hard for you to file remedies. And that is the only way you get away from not exhausting your process when going to the court. You need to be able to show to the court that you were hindered and this is how you were hindered. If you're not doing that, the court is going to deny helping you, and there is nothing you could do about it. All right, I think that is the end of what we need to focus on in the administrative remedy program statement. I might have missed something here. If you think I did, or you got questions about what you read and what you're covering here in these documents, please bring it up to me in training when we're in class, or hit me up in the classroom with your questions pertaining to this stuff, and I will do my best to answer you in a timely fashion. But I think the best place to do it would be in some of our actual classes that we're going to hold at the end of all the reviewing of these documents and these videos. We'll get to some of that stuff. Oh yeah, so I know you're tired, man. I know you're tired of me and this stuff, man. I know you are, but it's important, and so I'm gonna get away from this document and leave. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining the Remedy Project and the criminal justice realm. Thanks for sitting through and learning what it takes to do the administrative remedy process on behalf of folks who are incarcerated. You guys are super. I hope to see you for the next video, the disciplinary process, and the other videos, that couple other short videos that would follow, that teaches you some crucial elements to work along with this process also. All right. See you guys later. David Simpson, Remedy Project, Criminal Justice Realm out.